Let's see. Setting up. Check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. We'll wait to see if we hear bears. That might even be me. Hey, guys. Happy New Year. Happy Gregorian fake New Year. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, echo's gone.
You can hear us. Give us a thumbs up. I'm going to hit record. Just Bear and I today. We're going to usher in the new year with a wonderful in-house chat. So let me hit record.
Just Bear and I. This is the best.
This. Thank you, sir. I must be very conscious of the words that I use. Yes, never just. Not Justinian here. Okay, let me go ahead and hit record, and we shall commence the podcast. And boom, we're back for another episode of Alfacast. I'm Mike Winner, and I'm here as always with my partner in crime, Dr. Barre Lando, or actually partner in knowledge, wisdom, and illumination. We are in 2023, Bear. Can you believe it? 2023, pretty wild. We started this podcast technically a little bit in, I think, 2018, took a year off, came back 2019. So we're entering our 4th year of doing Alfacast.
That is pretty incredible. Phenomenal. I can't believe that. All I remember is I was in grade school watching The Jetsons, which was a new cartoon show at the time. And, it was supposedly set in the mythical era of 2000. And I remember with.
Oh, we got a frozen one. Did this happen on The Jetsons? I wonder if this is me or you. If everybody, was that me?
I've many years past 50.
Oh, hey,
crazy.
There, you froze there for a little bit. If you want to kick back to in 2000 with The Jetsons, hopefully your internet doesn't do this too much today.
Yeah. Am I back?
Yep.
Okay. It might happen periodically. In fact, I'm pretty sure it will, because I'm out in my lab and Mark Ivor is remodeling my room, which we'll talk about why he's doing that. So I'm out here in the lab and I've got one modem that's kind of sketchy as far as the upload. So in 2000, watching The Jetsons, me and my buddies in grade school, we just thought 2000, we'd be living in some futuristic utopia, and also, really consternating what it would be like at that point, because we'd actually be in our 50s. So here we are. Although I'm much older than 50s.
And we're not too far off a lot of those things in Jetsons world, from printing food to flying cars. It might be a bit of a pipe dream. I know that was always a thing from like the Back to Future movie, when he goes to the future and everyone's in flying cars, and of course Blade Runner and all those movies. It was something that for me as a child, I always thought would be really cool to see. And then you really look at the reality of it, and it's like, I don't know, man. Horse and buggy seems kind of alluring to me these days. And we'll be talking a bit about the times of the horse and buggy times with the Red Lion Elixir of Life book, which we'll be discussing today, which takes place during the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, during that romantic time.
Yep, absolutely. So not only did I have to be out in my lab because my regular war room is being remodeled for a microscope lab, but I wanted also to show everybody, give them a little tour of my chemical lab here, because I thought it was also appropriate, since we're going to be talking a bit about alchemy and explaining what alchemy really means and what it doesn't mean. And Mike, do you want to read the intro, or is that not even necessary?
Yeah, let's do
just you and I.
Yeah, let's do the intro, and that will give our audience a little bit of context. 2022 was the year of the Great Awakening, as we stated this time of the year last year when we opened up the year. And boy, that seems obviously very true. Not only do we have things like the Twitter files, whether you take that to heart to really be anything or not, in some of the awareness that came about with obviously the Biden administration with the sniffer in chief and the ridiculous that happened, the stuff that's come to light with that administration. Obviously, people even in the normie world are waking up to the died suddenly phenomenon. We just saw that Monday Night Football thing go down, Bear. I don't know if you were watching that or not. I don't care about the gladiator.
Yeah, I played football a long time, and then when I quit football, I was in the fight game for a long time, full contact fighting and everything in the martial arts world. And I never remember one time anybody having a heart attack during competition.
Yeah, imagine that, right? And back then, you guys were probably drinking beers right after the game and eating pasta. And supposedly we are in this like technologically superior professional athletic realm now, right? Where they have the most cutting edge athletic sciences of the day, and yet we've got hundreds and hundreds of athletes around the world passing out on the field with different cardiac arrests and issues. So doesn't take a genius to put one and one together there.
Yeah, and my years in the business, the medical business after sports was, looking at people's blood under microscopes and seeing all the elements that were in the blood causing problems that were related to roll up your sleevers. So Mike, just a word of caution, which I know I don't need to tell you, but we're going to have to talk in extreme code, because the last time you and I did an in-house here, I think you're aware, they removed our video from YouTube.
And did the loose tube pull
yeah,
us?
so
I don't even remember.
So our last time together, a month or wherever it was, it got removed for disinformation of the medical variety. So we'll talk about roll up your sleevers and all sorts of things today, but go ahead, finish with your intro.
Yeah. So that being said, 2022 was the year of the Great Awakening. The transparent machinations of the technocracy has laid the, quote, official narrative increasingly threadbare, while many have opted out of the elitist ant farm. Excuse me. This new year will undoubtedly be one for the books, but it will have nothing to do with the prevailing news cycles. A growing interest in the alchemical sciences is now revealing to many the very mechanisms of creation, and with it, the reins of self-determination. The classic novel, The Red Lion, The Elixir of Eternal Life, which was written by Maria Szepes during the Second World War and published in Budapest, chronicles a man's search for the elixir of life. The remarkable book revealed the broader alchemy of human existence, but was soon banned by the government there. The Red Lion is perhaps more relevant to present time than ever and will be the reference point for today's episode. Far too long, the term alchemy has conjured imagery of superstitious wizardry, but the actual chicanery lies in the bastardization of science through linear chemistry. This in-house conversation today with us and our community is the perfect commencement for the life-changing events clearly on the near horizon. We look forward to this today, as this is primarily the main foundation for Alfacast, for Alpha Vedic. Why we started this chat to begin with was to bring the spiritual sciences to light, Dr. Bear.
Absolutely. And you can tell I'm from a different era when I wrote that, using words like chicanery. Okay. So here we are.
I'd like to go more back to that world, by the way, and I would like to hear more of that vocabulary being spoken out of the mouths of our youths.
Well, I went through 12 years of parochial school and went to high-level universities and things, and they actually had 3 R's and that kind of stuff. And I still have the scars on my knuckles from getting hit over and over by nuns, so I can prove it. Yeah, it was a different time, and there still was a little bit of learning back then, even though we got our own brand of brainwashing, but not to the extreme of today. So, Michael, Happy New Year to you, my friend. And I think no better way than to start with you and I here. We have a lot of great guests lined up in the months ahead. but it's always good just to touch base. And I'd like to tell the Alpha Beta community a little bit about what we're up to here. And maybe we can start with, I've done a couple little broadcasts from this lab, but maybe we could give you a little more of a thorough look here. And since the theme of the day is alchemy, I'm in my alchemical lab, so let's take a look around. And for that guy that is going to be commenting that, hey, we're already 10 minutes, 15 minutes into this broadcast, and they still haven't talked about the red line. Well, keep your shirt on. We'll get there. And so here we go. So behind me, I'll just move the camera around here and we'll give you a 360, okay? So behind me, there's a Roto Vape. It's a very large distiller that's on a motor, and it works in a water bath so that when I'm distilling, I don't burn any, delicate ingredients, don't raise temperatures, to that point. And nothing gets scalded. And then if you look at the little blue gizmo there, that's one of a couple vacuums I have. So I hooked that up to a vacuum. And then under a vacuum, I can distill at even lower temperatures and protect what I'm making even more. Let's go around this side, since here you'll lose me here in a second. That there is a giant dehydrator, and we use that right now. I actually have some ashwagandha roots that we grew last season.
And lost you there for a second, kind of hard to hear, but that is our dehydrator, and you have ashwagandha root in there that we grown.
Yes, and great dehydrator, works great. There you can kind of see the entrance there. Let's go back around in my direction. Did you lose my voice again, Mike?
We can hear enough. And there's a great poster of the terrain film, which you were featured in, thanks to Andrew Kaufman and Marcy Kravitz.
Yeah, they did an amazing job with that. I was honored to be invited to be a participant. Now, here on the shelves, all of these jars, because we're just getting started now with tincturing from stuff we grew last season. So all winter, we'll be filling up those bottles. Each one of those bottles will have different spagyric concentrates of different herbs. And then that'll allow me to use some, different means, including biogeometry and things, in order to make customized formulas for people, with different combinations. And I think I just set my leg on fire here with the heater. Oh, I did.
Are you trying to turn your leg to lead?
Yeah, something like that. Okay, so here is behind me, I've got the vacuums. I got a nice lab sink there, more equipment over here. That's alembics and things for different kind of distillations. Another lab sink. This lab space turned out really nice. I can do just about anything I want here. And I'm going to be getting some more equipment, but I've got some pretty advanced stuff, so I can pretty much do everything I need to do except calcination, which is the last part of spagyricism. You take the herbs that you have been putting through other procedures, and then you recover the mineral salts from them. And with that, what I'll be doing is using this distiller behind me, where I calcinate them in a furnace. I'm actually, as we speak, building an outside oven right now. So I take a crucible, put all the plant matter that's been through all the other processes. I heat it up into a gray ash, and then I do that about a handful or more times until it turns pure white. And then with distilled water, I mix it and I put it in the Roto Vape behind me, keep distilling it down, and eventually discard all the stuff except for just a little bit of liquid with the purified salts left behind, and everything else gets tossed out. And then I concentrate that all the way down so there's no liquid, and you'll see little crystals and everything. And those are the unique cell salts for each plant species or minerals, if that's what you're doing. And those have the exact mathematical formula that actually make the plant medicine work. Say ashwagandha versus jiao gulan or any other kind of herb. Those are the, you and I have talked about this, Michael. We have capacitors on the ground, which we consider these mineral elements, they receive the resonance from the upper atmosphere. It takes and stores the electrical charge. That's why they're important in our body. That's why they're important to have those in medicine. If you don't have those, you're really not getting that complete resonance that a plant species is able to deliver in a medicinal. So I recover those. I put those in. We're also, doing a whole line of salves, as you know, medicinal salves that are also going to be specifically prepared. So this is where we'll be doing this all wintertime. And we'll probably have a cameo from the famous Mark Iver, who turned this building into, it was going to be a teardown, I thought. This was where our old solar system used to be before we upgraded. And there was a generator in there and everything. We completely gutted it, just cleaned it up, and with repurposed material. You can see, the ceiling and everything is, those are old fencing and everything that was laying around. The shelves over here, everywhere are pieces of redwood that were laying around in a field. We replaned everything. And so it turns out to be like a work of art. But at the same time, what Mark is all about is teaching people how to repurpose rather than just going to Home Depot and get more brand new synthetic materials and then throw your old stuff into landfills. We just canvas everywhere and get all this cool stuff. And, your creations turn out so much more artistic and, unique in that way. So Mark's a master at that. I think he'll pop his head in here. He's in the house right now in my normal podcast room, and we're refabricating an entire wall that'll be a microscope lab setup, because recently, with all of the messaging I've been getting from people contacting me with issues relative to the roll up your sleevers, relative to the stuff that is being sprayed in the atmosphere, relative to the Wi-Fi, contamination and everything. I really need to see, I want to help out some of these people. I don't want to go back into practice, but I am going into full-time research again. And so I will be using a select number of people to understand more what blood looks like these days and, figure out what to do about it, how to clean it up, as compared to when I was last looking at blood regularly with patients, which is when you and I first met, which was maybe early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
And then I just,
years ago.
Yeah, then I traded everything in for a digging bar and a shovel.
Well, I think this is extremely exciting. I would be interested to offer my pure blood, my RH negative blood that you can play with. I know you've been talking with the Bigelson brothers plenty about this and working with them on researching this stuff. Would be interested to see the play between the blood of an, as you say, roll up your sleever, as I like to say, a coronated one, that and relate that to Bluetooth signals. I know there's been a lot of talk about that with nanotechnology, relate that to different, bringing different signaling into the room and under the microscope, seeing if that affects the blood in certain ways, whether that be artificial signaling or mental signaling, psychic signaling. I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of fun stuff that can be done looking at blood from those who have unfortunately been coronated.
Yeah, I'll also have a treatment table set up. So when we have somebody's blood up on the screen, and I've mentioned this a few times in the past, then we'll do beneficial hands-on work on the person that we just removed the blood from. And then on the screen, watch the changes that happen in the blood, even though it's out of the body, but it's to prove that it's still resonating with that individual. And when we make real-time changes with the work we know how to do on that individual, you'll see the blood out of the body responding on the screen. So we'll make some videos about all that kind of thing too. It'll be a lot of fun. One of the things I really wanted to refabricate my room for also is in our new website, soon to be launched, we promise. We'll have a member section that's going to have a lot of educational material and things only for members, and it'll have that kind of content as far as things related to working in the lab, working in the soil, working on bodies. And we really want to help people understand on this platform that it's all alchemy. It's all one single science that works on the same exact principles. And that's a segue right into the Red Lion. And Mike, forgive me, but I read the Red Lion at least 30 years ago. And one of my favorite all-time books. And I absolutely remember the gist of it. You can't forget it. On the other hand, you'll have to maybe fill in some more of the details. And here's the book right here. You probably have a copy as well. And I'm not even going to try, after all these years and reading this a couple times, I still can't pronounce the author's name. So I'll just call her Maria. And if you can pronounce the last name, I'll let you take a stab at it.
I believe it's Szepes.
Okay, thank you.
And yes, this book you have recommended multiple times. I finally took you up on it, as many in our community did. And wow, my favorite book of 2022 by far. My favorite book I've read in a long time, to be honest. It really hit hard on so many fronts. It felt like I was reading the pages of just pure gnosis. It's hard to believe that this was a fictional tale in many accounts. Seems like tied into a lot of historic characters, which we can get into. But the fact that Maria supposedly, I think this was maybe her first book or her first fictional tale. I know she's written a couple other things. It's breathtaking in terms of its style and scope. And it's like she was channeling this or something. It's just really quite phenomenal, or she was given it to her to write, because it just seems like it's beyond something that a first-time author could put forth on paper.
Yeah, and she's from the old school, and obviously was very aware of every topic that she, uses in her storyline in the book. And that part of the world, Budapest was very rich tradition, and a lot of those people never forgetting, the fact that there are advanced masters running around, and that all.
We have an internet freeze again. Hopefully this doesn't. Okay, we lost you right at masters. Understanding that masters were still prevalent.
Yeah, so she was exposed to that rich tradition, and she also not only passed it together, but based her story on some real life experiences of things that I've read from other accounts that were not considered novels.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite apparent when reading this book that it just emits a gnosis right out of the gates that really kind of hits you in your core, in your heart, and you just know, wow, there's something special here that's being delivered through the fictional tales here. And like I said, a lot of historic figures in the book, a lot of actually characters from the alchemical history, from even the protagonist plays at points in his different life streams. And I guess the big takeaway out of the gates with this book is that really it has a lot to do with the science of reincarnation and the science really of spirit, of matter, of soul, and how the karmic cause and effects that interplay between life streams affect or are used towards the growth of the soul, right? And how really the alchemical process is something that is much deeper than transmutation of base leads to metal, of course, to gold. It's about the transmutation of the spirit of the soul out of matter and into the higher realms. And one thing that I really took to heart when reading this book is that, you know what, we got a long path ahead of us in terms of our development. And the greatest adversary that we have is the fear of death. And that's where we start with the character, the protagonist. I believe the first embodiment that starts as the Hans Bergner character, who is the sort of the fallen one, we find out later. And this is in, I think, the 16th century it starts. And he is one who comes right out of the gates looking for the so-called elixir of life, right? The
So
philosopher's stone.
Mark just walked in. We want to give him a little shout out to the community. Hold that thought. That'd be a perfect place to pick up. This is the famous Mark Iver who built this wonderful lab, and he's now doing his magic, building me a microscope research center in another building on the property. Mark, good to have you here, buddy. We couldn't do any of this without you.
Nice to be back at the magical land. All the Alfacasters out there, and I'm here doing my Mark Givering on the Lando land property. So good to see you, Mike.
Hey, great to see you, Mark, and nice to see that shirt. You're wearing the Gasky Raft Race shirt. It was awesome that you joined us this summer on the raft race. So that was a lot of fun. Mark got us right started out of the gates to take first place. He put a rope between his teeth, dove into the river, and swam us to our raft to the very front of the pack. It was quite impressive.
Just like my Uncle Jack LaLanne. All right. Well, hey, it's good to see you, Mike, and all you people out there, and see you on the next go round.
Mark, thank you.
Thanks for the little
cameo.
Take care.
Thank you.
Well, Mark Guyver is an embodiment of the alchemist spirit. He literally takes things that have been discarded and thought to be of no value, and he transmutes them into beauty. And that really is something I think we can take to heart today, is that the alchemical mindset is not just one, which we will talk about the chemistry side of things, but it's not just the blatant materialistic chemistry that people often, I think, relate it to. It has to do with like I was alluding to, the spirit, the soul, and the ability for us to transmute our reality in the present every moment with every breath we take.
Yeah, and what you speak on as far as in reincarnation, it's the exact chemical etheric process that I do in the lab here. It's the same thing we do when we're doing our agriculture outside. It's the same exact way I work on bodies. And all it requires is that you have to understand the entire energy matter continuum. And it begins with the fields above us or that permeate through us. There is no time and space in that realm, but they have the attributes that then are fed through the 12 constellations. And those constellations in an electrical system, we could think of them as induction systems. They take the energy, the electricity from conductance, they modulate it through induction, and then create 12 different resonant fields that then go through us by way of our senses. And we have 12 senses, neurologically speaking, not just 5. And our senses are a direct connection with those constellations. They are literally an extension of the constellations. We're not talking about a connection. We're talking about a real connection extension. So when those resonant fields are projected through our senses are considered divine because they are, again, extensions from the cosmos or from the heavens. But then once they embody, then they become what we would think of as dead, not in the traditional sense of death, but they become, heaven now creates a body. And in alchemy, we have different ways to describe this. But then at the same time, there's another element that is born from the earth, which is our blood, which begins dead, but then it's animated. And when we say dead, that doesn't mean that, it doesn't have certain functions that you can verify, but it is not a direct continuity with the heavens, which of course is projecting all of true life in the first place. So now you have this polar opposite happening with the extension from heaven coming down and taking on, the body attributes, and then the blood coming from the opposite direction, but then being animated and becoming divine, even though it started in the opposite direction of the senses. So forevermore, if you understand how those two forces play into our biology, and how those resonant forces come through the etheric network, what used to be very important as far as an understanding in real complete science. The ethers then step down through successive mechanisms in order to create the precipitation of what we call matter. And of course, the whole reincarnation cycle is about us coming to a point of awareness to realize that we are now, acknowledging the reverse cycle where we become completely aware and conscious on this plane, and then our bodies do not have to go through the same deterioration, aging, and also reincarnation cycles forever. So you were talking about all that as far as the red line. So pick up where you left off.
Well, there's so much to pick up from there. So one note on the blood then, because of course, blood factors in this book in multiple places. I know in one of his live streams, he's working a lot with the blood, and I think that has to do with the homunculus, which we'll talk about a bit, which is a fascinating part of the book with the homunculus.
Really trippy, right?
Yeah. But obviously, and I think John Dee, the famous alchemist during Elizabethan time, he talked about homunculus, and there's a lot of actual information from the alchemical texts about this entity, which I believe is rearing its ugly head again right now. Of course, we probably have a homunculus that is directly related to the last probably, 10 presidents in the United States. But that being said, the blood sort of is the duality then versus the sort of the light. So the light of the heavens is sort of the principle of the divine. Probably, I know they talk about the principle, what do they call it? In terms of the life's blood of the, it'll come to me in a second in this book. But you have the blood, which is the sort of, as you were saying, the core matter, which is the sort of the density, and then you have the light. And that sort of is the duality that we not are imprisoned in, but that we get to experience. I think we've had talks about this in recent Alfacast, this notion that we're imprisoned in it. But actually, the takeaway from a book like The Red Lion is that this isn't an imprisonment at all. We can imprison ourselves through the lack of knowledge, but this is actually in its core, the initiation into the greater understanding of individuals, that us as an individualized God.
And the interplay between the blood and the neurology, you could think of it as a toroidal field, where you have compression that goes through the ethers, compresses data into matter. And this is wonderful now because we have people like Walter Russell who describe the alchemical principles in electrical Western terms. And it's really handy because it's makes it amenable to application in all sorts of ways rather than trying to use archaic language from different eras. But if you appreciate that the blood is that compressed precipitation of data, but then it requires a moment-to-moment animation from the heavens by way of the neurology. And when you have that equal simultaneous exchange, then you have eternal life. But of course, if we don't know how to position ourselves as the intermediary between those two polarities, then we usually succumb to, what's just happening through the compression cycle, which gives us all of our issues in our bodies, in our society, and so forth. So, there's a lot of physics involved. There's a lot of alchemy. And, that's what we're here to learn through our experience, is that we can actually manage that compression radiation cycle to our advantage, not only so that we can get off the wheel ourselves, but also so we can create heaven on earth, which was the whole reason for this realm in the first place. I don't believe, and I think a lot of people that know more than I do, I'll say the same thing. This was not intended to be the school of hard knocks. We made it that way.
Yeah, and this is discussed later on, story in when he's more of an initiated into the Brotherhood life stream, where his father tells him the story of the fall, and it's the story of oh gosh, there's so many names in this book, Belshelti Dinar, and how Belshelti Dinar and that story of facing her own sort of evil that she created, the Leviathan, in her own sort of demonic desire for materialism. And then she casts that out and becomes all-knowing in her own universe, and then becomes lonely, and so then must individuate within herself aspects of her consciousness. And so this is kind of the origin story of us from the fall to what we are going through now as an individualization of the duality, and how we have a beautiful role to play. We all, each one of us, have a role to play towards the sort of great unfoldment of the divine. So it's, I mean, there's so much in this book that is laid out.
So Mike, could you get into the story a little bit as far as how the apprentice gets into his pickle in the first place, and the apprentice to the alchemist, and the alchemist,
Yes.
of course, the whole time knew exactly what the apprentice was intending. And so, yeah, maybe just start us off with that, because it's a fun part of the story.
Yes, definitely. So this book starts out with this kid, Hans Bergner, who is literally a burgher. He's a lower middle class peasant who is born into a family where his father died. He sees his father die. His father was kind of a lowly character whose mom, who's dominant, was a dominant force in their life, and his mom really never loved him. She was sort of a very selfish person who was just looking for the sort of materialistic to satiate her lust for her life, which was all materialistic. So this child ends up having an uncle who's sort of a traveling rogue of a mystic sort of alchemist, who teaches him about Flamel, who is a sort of a historic character who is very infamous in terms of bringing alchemy to Europe. And long story short, the character of Hans Bergner becomes obsessed with the Elixir of Life, and he is in complete fear of death. And so he runs across another alchemist in an inn he's working at, who he believes it has the true Elixir of Life, or the Philosopher's Stone. He becomes this philosopher brings him in, this alchemist brings him in, and so he becomes the apprentice, who then, just like literally out of like a Star Wars movie or something, crushes his own, he ends up killing the master to get the Elixir of Life, and then ends up drinking the Elixir of Life, which then spirals him into this journey of the book, where he must live multiple lives, where he can now remember, because he took the Elixir of Life without actually doing the work, without actually going through the alchemical cleansing, the process of purification. He basically is representation of the fall of man. He tried to hack reality and scam it by stealing and thieving. And so by doing that, he is then basically ushered into this sort of karmic debt, where he must now have these demonic astral forces around him that are torturing his soul. And he now cannot commit suicide. He cannot leave the space of life. He must be murdered to leave. But that being said, he now realizes that it wasn't him cheating death. It was him cheating his own. It was like he's kind of damning himself in this way. And this leads on to now reincarnation over the next few life streams of him growing to understand really what the Elixir of Life's all about. So he is now a tortured soul from drinking it after killing what we find out was Flamel. It was a reincarnation of Flamel. And he is kind of tortured because he can remember he doesn't drink from the drink of forgetfulness. So when he reincarnates in his next life, he completely remembers his sin, of murder, and now must sort of live with that guilt and the hellish demonic astral forces that torture him every day. It's really quite phenomenal.
And here's just another element to that. Our creative powers are unimaginable to most people. And in my medical work, I did very grounded medical work, with technologies, and had a real medical training. However, we had to go into other areas when people came in, with serious issues. And a lot of those were on that so-called subtle body level. And very often to deal with what we called entities. Now, in the field of osteopathic medicine, we call them energetic cysts, and actually had ways to use hands-on techniques with the cerebral spinal fluid in order to dissipate these energy accumulations. And also these energy accumulations could get very large and actually start kind of fouling up the machinery. So what we don't appreciate is just to say we have an obsessive thought about something. It can be something where you really have an issue with somebody and want to get back, or lust, or, any of the lower emotions. And if you're fixated,
got to pause here.
Okay, where'd you lose me?
We lost you at fixated. You're fixated.
Okay, so when you become fixated on these emotions, then it actually creates form. Now, the form is on the subtle body level, but it's very much there. And we had ways to verify this and actually to dissipate these energies that after a while, when they get strong enough, actually start affecting physiology. And we're often, the root of a lot of people's physical illness. So with going back to the book, Berger, what happened to him is he, like the rest of us, has all these fixations on lower emotions and things, but now he has complete transparency where he is seeing his entourage all the time. I myself am very happy I can't see my entire entourage. And when you understand that you're actually creating these little creatures on the etheric level that then become parasitic and then start, taking your energy, which is exactly what they do, as long as you have that fixation, you can actually see these forms, and that's what he was able to do. And of course, a lot of people with different belief systems would call them demons and all sorts of that are actually a product of their own imaginings and fixations. So this poor guy had to live with full acknowledgement of these guys, and began to appreciate over lifetimes that his body was actually a wonderful buffer to a lot of these energies, even though the body fails itself, until you're, as long as you're on the wheel. But at the same time, it really, mitigates the kind of energetics that we create ourselves. And so from there, this is what this guy was dealing with until there were no more. The good thing is we live at a time now where we're starting to understand these principles, where we can work with them and verify them in different ways as we do. And it makes you less inclined to be fixated on another individual, what the pretender in the White House is up to, or anything outside of, your real self, because the only thing we can change, of course, is our own universe.
Yeah, really what the reincarnated sort of stories that we find with this book is that the path towards self-mastery, right? And really the understanding that our thoughts matter. Every single thought that we generate manifests into it's the causation, right, principle of the Hermetic truths of. So the mental plane is where he finally must master in order to ascend. There's a lot of threes in this book, Barre, a lot of the Trinity being represented in the three life planes, the three Hermetic keys they mention. I wrote down a bunch of threes, the three bodies, the three planes. Could you speak to a little bit about that? They mentioned the three keys of Hermes, and I know that is what he is going through the process of when we come to the Saint Germain live stream, which for me is a highlight in this book, of course. And I believe Saint Germain is very much represented in a very truthful way here in this book. And I can't wait to talk a bit about Saint Germain, because I know you have a lot of background understanding about that character. But these three sciences, the three bodies, the three planes, can you speak to a little bit to that sort of triune reality?
Sure. So it starts with the 7 rays. And I know there's a lot of folks right now are saying, oh, he's into that United Nations 7 ray stuff. But you have to understand this is just the science end of it and not, what other New Agers have made out of it. So you have the 7 rays, and 3 of those 7 rays are considered the Godhead. It's the original electrical vectors with the, that creates, the polarization that then manifests and picks up other attributes when it expands into 7. In the Bible, they talk about the 7 thrones and all that sort of thing. But then that is filtered through the constellations. But then when we get to the ethers, that's where the 3s come in, that are the manifestation of those 3 basic attributes from the 7 rays. And, one's called active intelligence. The other one is love, wisdom, and Godhead itself is the will force. Now, those 3 attributes are embodied in our own biology and throughout all of nature. So when those constellations resonate down through the ethers, then they pick up these other qualities that we call light, heat, the different wet, dry, all the different kind of qualities. And then those combine, which is a good discussion in and of itself, and a way to create what we consider the elements, the 4 elements, which would be fire, air, water, and earth. Now, those elements combine, according to alchemical science, in different ways to create the 3 attributes. And we've actually gone through this a little bit in past episodes. And I think we did it in Anarchapulco too. But anyway, that creates what in alchemical terms we call Mercury, which is the prana, the spirit that moves through all things. This, again, is a combination of the 4 elements, the volatile and the fixed elements combined in different ways to create the 3. And then you have the sulfur, which is the individualized soul, which is, what is we are playing with here. We are in a journey of the soul. And then the body, or the salt in alchemical language, is, the actual precipitation of matter. But of course, the energy isn't in the matter. It's, with the soul, which is the induction system or the qualification that, manages the spirit that is given to us by the Mercury, by the Godhead. And people like Tesla, people like Gurdjieff, who brought this back from the Sufi traditions, with the Enneagram and so forth, they talked about this in terms of the 3 times 3, the mathematics, the resonance of 3, vortex mathematics. These are all valuable things that I jumped into a long time ago because it was very pertinent to things I actually had to do. Medicine has become, probably agriculture for that matter too, has become more of an academic science rather than a trade. And to be an alchemist, it's really a trade. You have to understand the electrical systems, the plumbing, the structural, again, 3 components of the human body, which gets into the treatment phase that I used to go into with people using neurology to be able to sequence out treatment in order to create the resets to help people regain their health. But when you understand the mathematics as Tesla did, as Walter Russell does, then you realize that resonance of the 3 is what is actually precipitating down to the capacitors in the ground, that makes agriculture work, that, we take into our bloodstream, that same resonance. And then that creates our bodies, and our bodies, going back to our early explanation of the neurology in the blood. Well, the neurology is like the salt. That's like the body. And this gets a little confusing when you start mixing these terms sometimes. But if you look at the human body, where the neurology first comes in the head, it's very solid. The head, you have structures that are kind of less movable, less mobile, and it's more the embodiment of just hard precipitation. Then when you have the metabolism, which is represented by the blood, that's the second part of the triune, and also the two polarities. But now the will force, if you go back to the three main attributes of the seven rays, that's the Godhead with the original idea that then precipitates the whole thing in the first place. Now that is represented by the more mobile parts of our body. That's the Mercury in alchemical terms. Now the extremities, of course, allow us to be mobile on the physical plane. It also, we consider that more a representation of Mercury. And then that movement, our ability to move, is also the manifestation of our individualization and our will force in a physical form. So you have those three things. And as we are able to animate our spacesuit through the time-space continuum, again, we are now exercising our privilege and our responsibility of having an individualized sense of will to do what we wish in our own creation and have our experiences and learn from our experiences. Did that get enough into the threes there? We could keep going because it's all 3, 3, 3, 3. And I could explain how that works in agricultural terms and everything else. That's why, we have to understand alchemy is the only one true science. And when it was created or morphed into a linear chemistry, that, of course, was the first part of the seduction into the materialistic realm, where we get caught in the so-called eighth sphere because we think we're these little stick figures with nothing to say about things.
Yeah, no, that was phenomenal. And I just, I've recommended this book a few times too. My other favorite book of 2022 was Thinking in Destiny. I know you have the book. It's quite a large reading, but they talk about the triune self as the core trinity of the knower, thinker, and doer, which can be related directly to the sulfur, mercury, and salt. It's all works together. I love how all these different traditions kind of come to this core principle of which really comes from the Hermetic tradition and Hermes, who is discussed here, Hermes Trismegistus, who I believe personally is the same person as Saint Germain. And in this book in Saint Germain, he talks about how I forgot who asked him where you come from, and he says, I've always been here, essentially, since the very beginning. Yes, it's just so fascinating. There's so many things in this book about what you're talking about, Bear. There's a character, Dr. Pollock, who is a phenomenal character because he kind of bridges the arcane and the modern sciences. And he talks about the problems with chemistry and how, because this is in, I believe, in the late 18th century, where chemistry is really starting to explode onto the forefront. And he talks about how the youth are now being so influenced by it, and how really the problem is that it's just a science of effects, where alchemy is the science of causation. And we're seeing that now, right, as we're mired in the scientism of effects and everything like the virus stuff, and which is just looking at effects, and the whole nature of like the sort of shape of the realm that people get mired in is just looking at the effects. And really what the beautiful thing about the science of alchemy is it's understanding the causation principle.
Yeah, and alchemy is also appreciating that transmutation is the only constant thing in all of creation. And alchemy, understanding transmutation, which is one thing changing into another thing, seeing that same pattern happen on every level of life and nature, and then being able to duplicate nature's processes and to achieve that transmutation yourself. So in an alchemical lab, of course, a true alchemist would say, okay, it's great if you know how to do some of the things I described as far as recovering salts, but those are just mechanical things. Until you do the work and understand that the work is mimicking these processes, and it's the exact thing that your soul is going through there's three parts of alchemy. There's the separation, where you take the three parts separate so that you can purify them, and then a coabation, which is putting them all back together and into an elevated, purified form. So when you understand these principles, say in a lab, or even if you're out just working in a garden, now you can actively appreciate, mimic those principles. And when you have that level of awareness, now you are resonating with whatever medicine you're making, with whatever you're planting on the farm. And then that resonance accelerates your own process. And it's not just about mechanically going through and tincturing herbs or any of that such thing. It's about doing the work. And of course, in alchemy, it's called the great work. So transmutation, we have to understand, and Walter Russell did an amazing job with this, showed us that even the elements on the periodic table are not fixed. So linear chemistry brought us into this belief system that there are certain things that are fixed, but nothing is ever fixed. If you're looking at a carbon element, all you're doing is appreciating that state of being. It's a state of resonance, but that state is going to change into the next little note on the octave, and it's going to jump octaves and so forth, as Walter really shows well in his books. So if you understand that now, you can understand more. Let's take this, just came to mind. So let's go here. We'll trigger some people here. We talked about diet, veganism versus carnivore, practices. And, people resonated with it. A lot of people got triggered. I got some personal emails about it. I really don't, I don't have a dog in that fight. I just do what I do, because I like doing it, and I don't care what other people do. All I want to understand is the science behind things. So let's say that you are a vegan, a healthy vegan. Not all vegans are healthy because they don't really know how to derive proper nutrition from those food sources. So let's just say you're somebody who knows what you're doing, and you have pure plant matter, which is more carbon-based kind of elements. So when you excrete, you should have very low nitrogen, in your excretions, and high carbon. Well, that isn't the case. What happens is if you have low amounts of carbon matter from plant matter, then you start excreting more nitrogen. And there's been a lot of experiments to validate this. Those higher nitrogen excretions, even though you aren't bringing in a lot of flesh and animal products into your diet, what it's showing is that the body transmutes that in your own body to make the nitrogen it needs. Okay. Now, conversely, if you need more of that, carbon-based matter and less of the nitrogenous protein, then what's going to happen is, say you're just on a pure carnivore diet. Well, you're going to be excreting more of those elements that you'd expect from a plant eater than from a carnivore, because it's taking all that high nitrogen matter and converting it into the other stuff that your body needs. Another example. So the point is if you are aware of these principles, then you're less hung up or emotionally triggered by diet, because you realize the real point of the discussion is that we are a transmutational factory, our own bodies, our own consciousness. And when you understand these things, now you are not beholden to things external to yourself, especially diet, because we are not what we eat. That is false from the get-go. You can create whatever your body needs. And of course, the cleaner that you run, then you have less of a ceiling on consciousness, which becomes even better at transmutation because you're not impeding what it would normally do. So what the name of the game here, of course, is losing all attachments, including the food. And that doesn't mean that we have to eat in any particular way or not eat at all, but it just shows you what our potential is. And maybe we should start taking advantage of that rather than staying in the realm of superstition that if we eat something, it's going to do this to us and so forth. You know, there's an old book a long time ago. It's called Seth Speaks. And yeah, we mentioned this before, I know, a long time ago. And the individual asked this Seth, who was, you know, supposedly a realm behind the veil, or a master behind the veils. He just said, well, what does this particular food do to you when you eat it? And Seth's response was, it'll do whatever you think it's going to do. So I'd like to put all of these dichotomies aside, and especially when we argue these different sides at the expense of understanding how things at work that are going to hold us back when we think that we are beholden or a victim of anything external to us. The other thing, you know, if you go to Ayurvedic cultures, they put salt on everything. They'll, you know, have lemonade, they'll salt it, everything's salt. And people that are from a different culture, they say, oh, that's because it's tropical here and you're using the salt in order to, you know, maintain fluid retention. But that's not the effect at all. It's about thermal protection, and potassium is the thing that regulates temperature in our body so that we can stay nice and cool and comfortable in a tropical environment. And it's good for our metabolism if we don't heat up. So when you take salt into your body, and again, more experimentation has borne this out, then that sodium that we would expect to see excreted in the bodily fluids is actually potassium predominantly instead. What the body is doing is transmuting sodium to potassium so that then the potassium regulates you know, the thermal properties of our body. In ancient Ayurvedic, which is one of the smartest systems on the planet, still is, they understood these principles. They understood transmutation. So transmutation is where it's at. And when I treat a body medically, then I have to understand how the three principles, you know, the mercury, the salt, and the soul, the sulfur, work together, and what part of the body, you know, whether it's structural, biochemical, or subtle body, electromagnetic, we call it, how those things work together. And then with real-time resets, you can get things in sync so that then those three attributes can work as a unit. And when you look at a person that maybe has a particular growth in one part of the body or some other malady somewhere, if you have eyes to see, you can see which of those three attributes are out of sync, and it'll tell you exactly, you know, where you have to start investigating and really, you know, focus your assessment and treatment on. So sorry, that got a little lengthy there, but.
No, that was amazing. The three key hermetic keys. It's you've really crystallized that for me. And yeah, Mark mentioning, oh, does this mean if you think that eating extra cheese pizza and Ben and Jerry's pints every day, I'll look like a Greek god? I will. And you know, we hear that a lot, especially when bringing up Germanic New Medicine and these other ideas of how our thoughts create our body and our will. Is principle. And obviously, if you are eating junk food, then internally you are denying this truth to yourself. And that's really the Hans Bergner character, once again, is that thinking that you can deny the truth to yourself in search of what your ego wants. And of course, that doesn't work that way. One of the principal ideas and concepts of this book is that there are universal principles of truth that all must succumb to or must agree to. We cannot escape it. And no matter what the black magicians try to do, like the Giuseppe Francesco Borri character, who is a real person in history, a true alchemist. In this book, he incarnates as him, and that is, of course, with the famous homunculus. And the homunculus does everything in its power to sort of cheat these universal truths, and is trying to create this principia materia, and it keeps failing and failing and failing. And then later on, when our protagonist incarnates as inside the Rosicrucian family. And what is his name there? Cornelius, as Cornelius. He says in his daily sort of searches in nature, he goes out in nature and plays and experiments and just observes really nature. He says, just by observing nature with 1 minute, I realized the power of transmutation within a simple, ant or an anthill or in just any sort of natural embodiment versus what the homunculus was trying to do. The homunculus, even with all the supposed power that he has, is pathetic and pitiful compared to a simple raindrop. And I think that is some serious gnosis there in the book.
Absolutely. And, for the folks that say, well, can I just eat anything? Well, kind of, sort of, but you want to make sure it's derived from the natural order so that it has the resonance that the transmutational processes can work with. So if you're eating, if you're on 100% Skittle diet or something, there's no mana, there's no resonance that, those processes can operate with. So, I love pizza myself. I make my own out of some sprouted flour and, sprouted spelt and, raw dairy products and all good stuff, So yeah, you can enjoy your eating, but you want to eat real food. And that's the one thing I got hit up with most in my practice days. Well, doc, what do I eat? Now I had ways to dial people in through metabolic typing, to see if they're a fast oxidizer, slow oxidizer, see if their sympathetic, parasympathetic system was, predominant and everything. Then we can give them little hints. I just look at their body structure, starting with their hands, and be able to see what kind of glandular predisposition they are from birth. Also use the doshas of Ayurvedic. So all those things really help you dial in as far as what kind of fuel might work a little bit better in a particular body versus the other. But other than that, I just tell people, just eat food.
ERFO, as our buddy Troy Casey says, ERFO, eat real food only. It's not that complicated.
No.
Speaking of transmutation, though, and someone earlier asked us what is like our fundamental product line or product in with Alphavedic. And I will say, I think a great example of transmutation and alchemy and what we offer is the Ormus, related to like our 0 point line, right? Our full spectrum 0 point liquids really embody the transmutation principle.
Yeah, I put a little verbiage about alchemical perspective on some of our product pages, because that's really where it's coming from. Just trying to think of a good example. Okay, so in our Lumen line, for instance, we have a number of products. One of them are 3 calcium products. I rarely even talk about them because it gets way much into the weeds for the average consumer, because it requires a little bit of experimentation with yourself. But here's what the deal is. They're calcium, and people say, oh, calcium, because, you're giving a supplement to us, it's going to make our bones strong. Well, no, not at all. Calcium is actually used in those products in order to drive the electricity in a particular direction. That's why I have 3 different formulas in the calcium line. And what do we call the lumen calcium, I guess? So there's 1, 2, and 3. And so the calcium is actually used to transmute the electrical vectors in the body in one direction or just stay neutral. Now, I am concerned about people getting calcium that is used for many beneficial or necessary, bodily processes. But the way I get the calcium is I put in naturally occurring silica, and it's from horsetail. It's a pure botanical whole food horsetail concentrate. Now, the silica, if you go back to the transmutation processes, just like we're talking about in Ayurvedic, how they know how to have salt to create more potassium internally in their own body. Well, the silica, which is one of the important cell salts as well, in the body, it's transmuted to calcium, but not just to calcium that we get in our foodstuffs, but calcium that can actually be used directly by all those tissues and blood elements that need that calcium to function. So when I'm making formulas those are the processes that I'm thinking of. Even if it's in a powdered nutritional supplement, I'm doing things in ways so that the body can have what it needs in order to satisfy the intention I have in the product in the first place, as far as what I want it to do, but understanding it from a process of what the body is going to do with it, rather than just think if I give somebody calcium, it's going to build strong bones and tissues and help with polarization of muscles and things like that. No, it's much more involved with that. And that's why the nutritional industry is a little bit behind the scenes, and nutraceuticals, all those sorts of things would really benefit if the folks would start understanding the body's transmutational abilities and complex things in that way. And then, of course, when we get into our spagyric system and everything, we take that another, whole bunch of notches in the same direction. All of our products have elements in there. That's why certain things are formulated with other things.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get more into the spagyrics this year, which will be offered to our members in the co-op. And I know we've been talking about it forever, but Bear finally has his lab, thanks to actually a GoFundMe that we did a couple years back too. So thanks to everybody who contributed to the GoFundMe, because that is directly contributing to the research and new alchemical developments here on the farm. Back to the book, Bear, there's just so much in this book. It's really, for those us, I guess we should have said spoiler alert too, for those who haven't read it, hopefully not giving away too much. It's such a rich book that I really, whatever we talk about today will not take away from the experience at all. There's just so much in it. I mean, there's so many characters in it. Marie Antoinette, of course, we mentioned Saint Germain. Who else? Casanova is in it as a fantastic character. And one of the sort of storylines through it is the reincarnation of these different characters that sort of come in and out of the main protagonist's life streams as well. So he actually gets to see other characters and other people reincarnated in their path forward. And I think an important thing to understand here is while we are all an individuation and we're all on our own individual journeys, really this is extremely important to understand that we all affect each other. The cause and effect, we have free will to an extent. However, also we are at the sort of peril, if you will, of our brothers and sisters and their own process of growth. And they can affect us, right? As what happened with Hans smashing the head of his mentor Flamel. And of course, the way the book ends, spoiler alert, the same thing comes full circle as he gets his head smashed by what ends up being sort of his Hans Bergner.
And the main principle in alchemy is that there can only be one. So as we've all individualized, not only at the soul level, but then had all these, hundreds and even perhaps thousands of reincarnations at the level of the soul, we're all from the same source. There is only one. And the light show that Walter Russell describes through his understanding of electrophysics is what gives the appearance of many forms, when in fact, now we can get into a lot of the simulation people that we've had on our show in the past that say this is a simulation. It is, and everybody has their own version of what the simulation is about. But bottom line, there's only one thing, and that's the first thing you understand in the science of alchemy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think people get triggered by the simulation because they automatically go towards this sort of materialistic scientism-based concept of a AI generated controlled robotic simulation. I personally, in coming from the Hermetic tradition, which I believe is the core principle philosophy that all religions come from, that all sort of, the Platonic thought, the Pythagoreans, all the great traditions come out of. The idea is that this is a grand divine simulation of that we all have a role to play. Yes, the world is a stage. However, I think we often get caught up in the cynicism that then there's no point in it, which is not true at all. We all have a divine role to play as actors on the stage. And I can't think of a better personage, a better character in a book that explains this than Saint Germain, who is playing out that role for eons and really embodies the divine in a way that is really, is amazing in this book.
Yeah. And, everybody is going to eventually play a role similar to what Saint Germain has done in this world. We are all, powerful spiritual beings in training, and we are already creating, even within this realm, our own world. One of the things I have mentioned before is that whenever I had a patient, the first thing I would do is sit them down and have them look at their blood. And in a single drop, you would have all these myriads of life forms. And what I tried to impress is that these life forms that you're looking at are the people of your world. You are the God of that world. And I could demonstrate in ways, as we were already talking about, how when they do certain things, or if I did something, with their body, you would see those creatures react. They are every wish and command. Every time we have a thought. So again, we are the God of their universe. Now, there are some that would suggest that just as we are on a expansion of consciousness, or what you could think of in linear terms as an evolutionary process, all of these creatures, what they talk about in the Ascended Master teachings, is they're referred to as elementals. And some of those elementals, if they are treated right, will also go through a process of evolution and become conscious, self-determined beings. So in another realm someday out in the far, far future, they could be peopling our worlds, our realms that we create. Now, this is going to step on the toes of a lot of belief systems, but I think there's more truth to that than not. And at very least, if you understand that these elementals, whatever you think of them, which we can prove react to every thought and feeling that we have, then maybe we ought to be practicing more responsible stewardship and, having less toxic thoughts and feelings going through our being, and maybe become a little bit more responsible. And the proof of the pudding is that people that get a little bit more advanced in those practices usually find out that their life runs a lot smoother on every single level when they aren't in a constant drama in their mind and body and emotions. So, Saint Germain is playing a very pivotal role. He's the Lord of the violet flame. And when you get into the 7 rays, you understand that the 7th ray is the resonance of transmutation. It's the purification. So him being the master of that ray, which for whatever reason only he knows, that is his particular main attribute. That's why he is playing this role for this planet. And he was with a lot of folks and in a very advanced civilization about 70,000 years ago. Some of us even have memory of that time. And right now we're coming around the bend to once again create a civilization like that, only this time it won't succumb to all of the stuff that tears every civilization apart, and which is what the predator class right now is trying to achieve again. And also why they're bombarding us with all these frequencies and things, so that we do not get those clear resonant messaging, from the higher realms. If they can kind of cut us off from that, then we're going to be more stupefied on the ground, which is why you see a lot of people around with masks and all that sort of stuff on.
Yeah, we're definitely got to see a nice visualization of that playing out in the last few years, literally with the mass, showing what I guess the esoteric occulted ones would call the profane, because they literally are the swine that are still lost in their own sort of materialistic state of fear. Saint Germain, there's a section in the story where he literally goes to his own funeral. And if you call it a funeral, it's really a rite of passage where he goes into the coffin, if you remember. But during that point, there's some serious like Rosicrucian secret doctrines that are laid out in the book that were probably pretty secret before that. I mean, maybe in the late 19th century, I guess a lot of this was allowed to come out. But in that, he talks about the 11 rules, which I can say here, which I think the 11 rules are pretty profound in terms of a direction and towards living what I call the way, which is what everything comes down to, what the Christ, the Nazarene talked about, Buddha, etc., Zoroaster. And these are them, the 11 rules, which are: 1, love God above all else. 2, use your time to develop your soul. 3, be completely unselfish. 4, be sober, humble, active, and silent. 5, learn the origins of the metals in you. 6, beware of charlatans and liars. 7, constantly revere the highest good. 8, learn the theory before you try to practice. Very important. 9, practice charity towards all beings. 10, read the ancient books of wisdom. And finally, strive to understand their secret meaning. Pretty phenomenal, I will say, in terms of life's practices right there, all into one. Saint Germain in this book is just really embodies the I am concept, even though he doesn't really ever say the I am presence in this book. Those words don't come out like he does in other texts, but really feels like a living character. And for those who have mentioned, you know, other people talking about Saint Germain as a physical embodiment during that time, the Count Saint Germain, which there is a lot of fascinating, amazing stories about. There are people that are saying they're, you know, literally blood relatives to Saint Germain and to this day and are on podcasts, etc. I got to question that, and Bear, you helped me come to that higher understanding. In this book, he's asked by Casanova if he has sexual relations with all the women, and he says no. He makes it very clear this principle of sort of divine sexuality, or divine, the concept of the gender. And Saint Germain was not physically sort of in that gross materialism anymore at that time, right? So for him to have sons or ancestors, descendants, doesn't really ring true when you understand the core personage or who Saint Germain is.
And with the authentic teachings that have come across through Saint Germain, if you can appreciate, just go with it. Let's just say you have a master that has gone through our, same experience, trials and tribulations, and has gotten off the wheel. I mean, I don't know why that wouldn't be true, because if you look at every facet of nature, that's just the way everything works. We are part of nature. We aren't an exception. We just have the ability to become self-aware. So when Saint Germain or any ascended master gets to that point, just like you're saying, they do not have to engage in procreation and all the other things that they've already been through. They're out of that game for good. But at the same time, if they are playing a pivotal role in the evolution of humanity to help wake us up, would it make sense for them to be channeled through some dude on YouTube? And that's why in the original Saint Germain teachings, not all this stuff that's come after, but the original ones, they make a very strong point that we will never do that, because it would very quickly lose the resonance, the purity of resonance of our message. And it's not just words that they convey, but it's a very real resonance that hits you on 7 different levels. So I don't have any problem with somebody that's saying I'm channeling whoever. That's fine. You know, what do I know? But at the same time, I'm not going to subscribe and start following some guy around, because the original teachings are there. When you expose yourself to the original teachings, the resonance is palpable. There's a purity that's undeniable. And when you go to other sources, the human is so recognizable. And, you know, when you work on bodies for a long time, you kind of develop a little bit of a sixth sense about those sorts of things. And so anyway, if somebody, you know, is channeling whatever, well, great, good luck with that. That's part of your experience, and that might be exactly what you need. I just don't think I'm going to be reading your books or tuning into your podcast.
Yeah. And moving on with the book here with Red Lion, you were mentioning an important aspect of your practice and understanding how the transmutation inside works, that the elementals and how mind and imagination can literally create in this realm. And in that kind of final test of our character when he's Cornelius, Saint Germain has him go through a test here with I don't know if I pronounced this right, but this is a Tibetan concept of the kill core. And if you remember this, Bear, where Saint Germain leaves after he's left his body, or, you know, that current role, and after he gets put in the coffin, he leaves Cornelius with a carved statue of a sort of black magician that is carved in clay, and takes three to 4 years of Cornelius doing intense work, where he literally turns this Kilkakor, I believe how you pronounce it, into an actual animated creature. Yeah. Where he is breathing, and he's kind of he walks and he does chores. And then one night, Cornelius wakes up to being choked by this creature, and the creature demanding his freedom to walk out and be released from the tethers of his creator. And now this is the great test that he must go through, the final sort of test before he is, through the three keys, if you will, to become a master himself, an adept. Really, really fascinating stuff. I did a little bit of research into the Kilkor sort of, story, and going back to the ancient Buddhist times. There's not a ton online about it, to be honest. Really kind of relating it to the mandala stuff that they do, that the Buddhist monks do with the different chalks and sands, the colored sands. But this idea of animating a statue is really a fascinating part of the book.
There are practitioners that animate dead bodies and, kind of Weekend at Bernie's kind of stuff. And that's a real phenomena. We have that ability. The whole point of that part of the story was that if you are embarking on your ascension and going to become a co-creator, or even have a major role with other living beings, then you now become even a creator of a being that then, of course, you can't use the way the wannabes these days, want to create little robotrons and then control them for their own whims or kill them whenever they want. But if you are using that as an exercise for your creative abilities, and, this will stretch a lot of imagination, but I believe that kind of stuff happens. And, then that is part of the practice. And of course, they explained how at that level of development, then that was an exercise to be actually to harness that focus and intention with no malice in order to create an animated body that would allow you to go into the next realm. It doesn't mean that animated body has to stick around or whatever, but the point being is that just because you created it, you can't enslave it either. Again, like folks are trying to do now. There's a lot of information about past civilizations, one of them being Lemuria, which was a civilization allegedly in the Pacific basin, Hawaii being the tips of the old continent. And I did have a lot of experience in that part of the world, and also worked with some traditional kahunas for a long time. We became very close friends, and they are very, very much not just believers, but you know, have evidence that these civilizations did exist in that part of the world. Now, when that civilization was prominent, the people of Lemuria were still very much in their creative powers. And before our major fall, our thoughts manifested much more quickly, which of course is why things are happening very quickly now, because things are manifesting as our consciousness, gets quicker, and as the veils grow thinner. That's why we say, okay, these days you got to have your wits about you, because anything you're going to entertain in your consciousness is going to manifest in your world a lot quicker. Well, back in Lemuria, they were actually able to create these forms at will. They're still intact with those powers, just like, creating the little creature in the book that we're talking about. And as they retained those abilities, but simultaneously fell from grace, so to speak, and started entertaining lower emotions, then those lower emotions started developing forms, which, according to the Ascended Master teachings, are the forms that we now think of as animals. So animals are the physical forms, the embodiments that live on today, that are the embodiments of the lower emotions of those times when people were creating those kinds of animals. And to this day, they say the domestication of animals, when we have a dog, is we are freeing them, so that they can be absorbed back into universal and not be trapped in these lower, animal forms and exhibiting. Of course, they don't do anything, out of meanness like people can do. But, if they're a predator or whatever, they're just doing what they're designed to do. But the domestication of animals also in herds is a step towards that direction. That would also make people think about, well, is it cool to have Auschwitz meat factories? Again, we get into that subject, but it goes a lot deeper than we can possibly imagine. And the animal forms on this planet need to be freed through love, but it's also what I brought up as an illustration of how the consciousness of mankind is capable of creating forms in exactly what you're talking about that they describe in the book.
Yeah, and I think what's exciting about where we're going with our community and with Alfacast and over the last few years is, as we come to a higher understanding of this, the self-mastery principle, that we are embodying that as much as we can and living it day to day in the present. And what is the immediate result of that is no fear. You notice on this channel, guys, we don't really go into a lot of the traditional quote unquote fear porn you see on a lot of these quote unquote truther channels, where as we introduce this talk about the news cycle and all of that, because that is just the drama that is within the fear spectrum that we can easily circumvent when we have a higher understanding of the alchemical process. So it's been really cool to see the community growing up with that. I'm wearing a Music and Sky sweatshirt. Really, that resonated. That was palpable at the Music and Sky festival this year. People were kind of over all talking about that. It was more about where are we going now? How are we resonating together? What are we creating? And in the end, that's really the powerful takeaway of this, is what can we create right now with our superpowers? because we all have these superpowers. And another book, you know, after I finished this book, Bear, I got really like hungry for more. And I was like, what else can I read? And you had given me this phenomenal book a couple years ago for one of my birthdays. We share a same birthday date almost, and we had a party here, and you dropped off a couple books kind of on the sly. And I've read them both, and one of them is The Brother of the Third Degree, and I believe that's what it's called, right?
Yeah, classic, total classic.
Here it is. And this book kind of takes off right where the Red Lion leaves off, and it goes deep into the initiation into this sort of secret brotherhood. But the takeaway once again is this does require active work every day. Discipline, for one, is a very important element to understanding how we can achieve these great results, is through discipline. And the Cornelius character, as he is reincarnated, his parent, they say that basically his parents were already waiting for him. They knew he was had gone through this initiation thousands of years ago, had the fall with the Hans Bergner type character and the Giuseppe character, and the one he has where we didn't even talk about, where he kind of has the astral cleansing when he is partnered up with Karina, who is this phenomenal character who she literally embodies the pure astral form of sort of the material, you know, devilish, I don't know, ego, right? All the dark side of the physicality, just pure lust. She's just a creature of pure lust, that it's his first sort of love, where he falls in love with the female form. And it is all just about form with her. It's just pure sexuality. And he gets destroyed by her. And when he passes away, he dies of an illness, young at 36 years old. He is now stuck to her. And he through what he calls the green veil, I believe, or the green portal, watches her from the astral realm as he sees her whole life unfold. And he sees all these other spirits that are attached to her. And he needs to go through that cleansing, that process through her in order to let go of all of that, those sort of, you know, lust and all the seven sins, really, right? Avarice and greed and sloth and all of that. And so there is a moral tale to this book. It really does come down to living the way, as the Christ explains, that this is all about living a moral life. And, you know, going back to those 11 principles that Saint Germain lays out, and like literally being like a samurai, a Ronin, if you will, or a chivalrous knight in the world, where you're on the stage for a reason, to be selfless and to live in the present and master your thoughts, and not be one of the profane or the swine. And I think it's the takeaway from the book for me was, wow, I've got a lot of work to do, but this is exciting, and this is why I'm here. And it's really a phenomenal for that takeaway.
But when you realize what the work is for and what you're really doing with it, then it becomes fun. It's not an ominous task. It's not making yourself bad, judging yourself or anybody else. No, that's why we play the game. That's what my old football coach used to tell us all the time. We might go running out in the field and thinking that we were totally superior because we're nationally ranked and we're playing a lesser opponent. But anything can happen. So that's what makes it fun. That's why we play this in the first place. You know, you make some important points too, because this sort of subject matter, again, is very triggering. And I completely understand. We can take people with different beliefs, different religious inclinations, you know, more Orthodox Christianity, you know, and not saying anything negative about anything. They are all paths that I believe lead to the same place. But very often when we are in one particular camp and it doesn't match the narrative that we have been taught through our camp, then we have to look with not just suspicion, but with, you know, much worse at these kinds of beliefs. So I think a good way around it, rather than just dismissing, you know, if we talk about seven rays, or if we're talking about alchemy or resonance or or any of the such, rather than say, well, this is new age bonk, or, because you don't understand the science, or if you say it's the devil's work, or something that is contrary to what the Nazarene taught. Well, what did the Nazarene teach? He taught love. He taught unconditional acceptance of each other and treating people as you would like to be treated yourself. And everything that we're describing here, everything that we're talking about is exactly the same. So let's just say, Mike, that some of the things that we believe in are totally wrong. We're, barking up the wrong tree, and these other people are right. We've just succumbed to some kind of superstition or whatever. Okay, fine. I don't have a problem with that. But the way we conduct our lives according to our belief system is loving kindness, make no war on any other living being, accept all others, extend as much freedom as you desire to, for yourself to other folks. So I don't see how there's any downside listening to, or conducting your life according to Christian principles, which is what we just described, just because maybe you have a different belief system as far as who's running the show from behind the scenes, or what our real potential is. I think that hang up is just really not well thought out by folks at React. And I think if they took a little time to learn, or at least to practice what they preach, as far as unconditional love, then, we wouldn't have a problem, and maybe we could all get on the same page a lot sooner than we think, rather than, succumbing to the divide and conquer tactics of folks that created religions and things in the first place.
Yeah. And back to the book, when he's Luis de Austral, when that's the life where he dies at 36, there's a great scene where he is enmeshed in all these, they call them the lambs, right? There were all these like really religiously astute, supposedly, characters that had, given up all of their possessions, and they were very much trying to preach to each other about who's the most sort of religiously inclined and chaste. And literally, though, in the background, they are sort of these impetuous, petty, very much hypocritical characters. And I think it's an important thing to remember that, yeah, beliefs can take you so far. Beliefs are crucial, but it's how you enact them, and it's how you actually live, and what you do. And that's why we physically embody, because that is the true test, because that is where we know what our true metal is literally when we are thrown a curveball on our daily activity, and then how we react, right? How we actually behave, how we treat our fellow brothers and sisters. So we can, a lot of people are wonderful at putting that sort of illusory white robe on, but really, what are you actually doing? And we see that a lot with influencers in the space. They talk a big game, but what are they actually doing in their lives behind once the webcam turns off? And that's something that we try to strive here at Alpha Vedic, is live the way. And I'm by no means no saint. I'll be the first to say that, but doing everything in our power to actually embody and live what we speak. And it's why we show up, as you said.
Yeah, and that's what alchemists called the great work. And just to give ourselves a pat on the back here, everything that we talk about, we're actually doing. And we're actually doing it before the advent of the internet, before YouTube ever existed. We're learning our ropes, playing sports, experimenting in our own physical laboratory, seeing what we could do as far as getting performance out of our own bodies and others. Also learning, medicine in all its different forms, and practicing over thousands of bodies, looking at blood under a microscope for countless hours, developing farming operations to see how things grow, to test out, what we believe we were learning. And I'll tell you, along the way, a lot of stuff I thought I knew and that I learned just through academics didn't pan out, when you're actually on the ground. I see a lot of things, especially in medicine these days, alternative medicine in particular, that we always have the latest nutraceutical or product, and people say, oh, I take this and this is what you need to do that. And, when you're seeing thousands of folks, you realize that not everybody reacts the same way. You also realize why people don't react the same way. You also learn, what might be good for yourself. So that's a process that we're all going through. We're all individualizations, and we all have a uniqueness that is different from any other life form in all of the history of creation. So that is what we need to embrace in ourselves, embrace in each other. And when you just can look at another individual, another life form, and fathom just this individualization of the creator in all of its uniqueness and individuality, it's real hard to get whizzed off at somebody, even these folks that are misusing the power that they've been given. All we can do with them is, we don't have to like their personality or what they're doing, but we can forgive. And we also can understand that because we are in a place of power ourselves, we do not have to become a victim of whatever they do in the first place. And that brings me, I think, full circle to maybe where we want to finalize today is this whole episode was about the year of alchemy and 2023. If people don't understand through the prior year that we've all been played and if they haven't got enough insight that all of our institutions, financial, medical, and everything, lawfare, everything included, are all machinations in order to dupe us and to control us and even to kill us, then, well, you might need to play the game somewhere else. But we had all the exposure, all the revelations we needed in 2022. 2023 is where we embrace the science of transmutation, use it to our advantage, and above all, realize we are not victim to anybody or anything.
Beautiful. That is an encapsulation I am in full agreement with, and I'm excited for 2023. Cordal, which I've been involved with, is transmuting fiat into new reality through decentralization. And thanks for everybody for sticking with us there. This is truly done out of the goodness of the heart of the developers. And we will be launching Q apps this year, which will allow us to finally realize this platform so we can have alternative YouTube, alternative markets on there, all done with each individual node supporting it. So that's one example of transmutation. And then, of course, we'll be transmuting fear into love continually with everything Alphavedic's doing this year on the new platform with educational workshops. Bear, I know, and also lots of videos from your lab and helping those folks that are interested in these different type of creative endeavors to learn how to, apply those in their daily life.
Fantastic. Good talk, Mike.
Yeah, man. I've been really on this kick since reading this book. I'm actually listening to it now. For those who don't want to purchase the book, you can listen to it. We've shared this before, but Brian Scott on his phenomenal, fantastic YouTube channel, he does an amazing narration of the book. It's a two-parter on YouTube. I'm actually listening to it now because my copy's over in Jacksonville. Now splitting time between Jacksonville here and on the river. But that being said, you can listen to it. However, we also have it on our Amazon book list, and I got it from Thrift Books, even though you can get it on Amazon. And you can go to alphavedic.com/book list. Brother of the Third Degree is the other one I highly recommend. This is a really fun read. And then also, I just recently watched The Fountain again, the Aronofsky movie. I know your son's a big fan of him in that movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Bear. The Fountain with God, who's in that? Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz. And that movie really personifies this alchemical reality, right? Where he's living in 3 different lives and she's with him in those live streams. And he is a MD in one of them in modern times. So he's like deeply ingrained in the scientism, trying to save her life. And then, of course, he's also on this like spaceship flying through space with the Tree of Life. And there's so much allegory rich in that film. I highly recommend, if you guys haven't seen that film, watching that. And recently I just watched also a really cool book, a really cool movie from 1937 called oh gosh, don't let me blank on this. Endless Horizon, I believe, based on the book. And that's a phenomenal one where a Westerner ends up finding
Razor's Edge or the
Razor's Edge. I haven't seen yet still, but that's related to it. Similar idea where they basically discover
Lost
Shambhala.
Horizons you're talking about.
What's a Lost Horizon, right?
Yeah, there's 2 versions. The old one's really cool. And the Razor's Edge is amazing too. And you know, my favorite version of that is not the old one, it's the relatively newer one with Bill Murray. And you know, when I first saw it, I thought there's no way Bill Murray can pull this off, but he was phenomenal in it.
I really need to see that. The original one, the Lost Horizon, is Frank Capra actually directed that, and that was 1937. It was one of the most like extensive movie sets of its time. They estimate that would cost now about $40 million to make that film.
Wow! Because
they completely built that set of the Shambhala set, and they actually lost a bit of it. They lost, I think, about 20 minutes of it, and when I remember when I was going to school for film school, they were actually going through the process of finding that lost footage, which they couldn't find all of it. And through UCLA Film School, were able to bring a lot of that lost film back. And it's really amazing. I highly recommend it. It's there's a lot of interesting lore around Shambhala. It also relates to Saint Germain, the Ascended Masters. So I bring that up because it's just fun to embrace the magic, right? And the mystery. We've lost a lot of that in the last few decades, and there's nothing wrong with it. I believe the scourge of modern times is this cynicism that comes out of materialism. And it's really, we love to engage in fantasy because we understand what the creative imagination can actually bring forth in this reality.
It's the only creative force in the universe, our imagination. And that's what we're taught to quell, you know, first thing in the public fool system.
Well, this has been such a great chat, Bear. I'm really excited for this year. We'll have a ton of amazing guests coming on to talk deeper into alchemy and the alternative sciences. We've got Topher Gardner coming on soon to go into electrical universe concepts and everything. That guy gets all this stuff. I really want to talk more about implosion technology versus explosion, and dive deeper into the real sciences of the realm. Schauberger, baby, which Topher talks about as well. Next week, we have Devon, the Black Airbender. So we'll be getting into everything that he does. He doesn't eat food. He's really into the etheric energies and scalar. He calls scalar energies, whatever we want to call it. This relates to Wilhelm Reich and the orgone and everything we're all about. So that's going to be a phenomenal talk that'll be very much parallel to what we discussed today.
Okay, so everybody in our community, love you a whole bunch. And thanks for sticking with us these last years, and couldn't have done it without you guys. This year, you know, we're hitting the ground running. So it's going to be a very special year, and we're going to try our best to you know, really make a lot of meaningful offerings to our community, and you know, also have more of an interactive platform through our new website, because there's so many folks that I'd like to interact with, but because we're scattered with all different kinds of you know, everything from Telegram to our site to, you know, work out here, everything's going to be consolidated. So we can have more of a direct funnel into, you know, the folks that really want to, you know, work with us directly. And, you know, it's taken a lot of effort to get our present farm to this farm, but we now have enough outbuildings and things, you know, that we've shared with you guys that, you know, we're doing some high level work. We got a new business center. We got other things in the works. Our aquatic center will be, you know, completed hopefully later spring. So all of those things we'll be sharing with you, and you guys are all making it happen. So thank you.
Love you all. This community is what feeds us, keeps us going. Thank you guys so much for all the support. We're really excited for this year. You can find out, if you're new to us, find out more about us at alphavedic.com. You can join our current co-op, and we have an online co-op on Patreon, which will be moving over to the new platform. At patreon.com/alphavedic. I did put out a recent request, or I guess an offer, excuse me, for an intern to come in and help me out with updating a lot of on the digital side on the website. We got to get Alfacast updated on the website. And then we will be putting forth a lot of content on the new platform. And so this internship is sort of a mentorship to come in and learn the ways of what we do here, and then come on to have a paid position over time. So I haven't had a ton of response yet. If this is something that interests you, this is really ideal for someone, you know, late teens, early 20s, younger, that has the time, really. That's why I say that, and also is hungry to learn and to come on board and help us on the digital side. You can email me at mike@alphavedic.com. We would love to bring on the right person for this. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. We'll see you next week. We love you. And remember to get outside, get your feet in the dirt, go plant something. Even if it's winter, start prepping your seeds. I'm ordering seeds as we speak. If you're down south, well, hey, you're in the heart of summer, so you should be enjoying your garden right now. Get outside, go for a hike, go skiing. That's what I plan on doing this weekend. And love you guys. We'll see you next week.